48 hours ago, something happened that almost no one noticed at first. One man woke up after a restless night and realized the words he had spoken in frustration the day before were now playing out in front of him. A woman, unaware of any spiritual shift, spoke a simple sentence of hope over a situation she had nearly given up on, and within hours something moved. Not magically, not theatrically, but undeniably. What began 2 days ago wasn't loud, it was precise. Ancient, intentional, almost surgical in how it revealed itself. This unfolding event feels less like something new and more like something restored, a divine principle reactivating after years of being ignored. The same force that once spoke light into darkness now seems to be pressing gently against human speech again, reminding people that words are not just sound. They are signals, seeds, architects. Throughout history, this power has always existed quietly beneath the surface, but now it feels closer, faster, more responsive. People are realizing that what they speak doesn't disappear, it organizes, shapes, and sets direction. Some are feeling relief, others conviction, many curiosity. At the center of this unfolding story isn't a prophet on a mountain or a voice from the sky. It's ordinary people, flawed, distracted, sincere, suddenly becoming aware that their own mouths carry weight, that their inner dialogue may be the most influential voice they ever hear, that the ancient truth about life and death resting in speech may no longer be symbolic, but active. This isn't about fear, it's about awareness. It's about recognizing that something sacred has re-entered the room, quietly asking to be taken seriously again. And the most astonishing part, the event is still unfolding. Every word spoken today participates in it. If this resonates with you, if you felt something shift recently, even if you couldn't explain it, stay with this story. Let's explore what's happening, why it matters, and how it may already be shaping your life. If this introduction stirred something in you, support the journey by tapping the like button, sharing this video with someone who needs it, and typing a comment to let others know you're here and listening. Relieved face. 48 hours ago, something subtle yet undeniable began moving beneath the surface of everyday life. It didn't announce itself with noise or spectacle. There were no headlines flashing across screens, no alarms sounding in the streets. Most people went about their routines exactly as they always had, waking up, checking their phones, heading to work, talking to family, scrolling, driving, eating, sleeping. On the outside, nothing looked different. But underneath all of that familiar motion, something ancient stirred awake, like a long-forgotten current starting to flow again. Some people noticed it as a strange shift in mood. Others felt it as a sudden clarity or an unexplainable heaviness, or even a quiet sense of expectation, as if something important was happening just beyond what they could see or name. Conversations began landing differently. Words that once passed by without impact suddenly lingered. A casual comment felt sharper than expected. A kind sentence seemed to reach deeper than usual. People found themselves replaying things they had said hours earlier, wondering why those words felt more significant now. It was as if the background noise of life had lowered just enough for something powerful to be heard again. Not everyone could explain it, but many could feel it. Ordinary moments started carrying unusual weight, and the invisible space between thought, speech, and outcome felt thinner than before. This wasn't randomness. It wasn't coincidence. What began stirring wasn't new at all. It was old, older than systems, older than nations, older than history as we usually tell it. It was a force that had always been there, quietly shaping lives while remaining mostly unnoticed. And now, after generations of being treated lightly, casually, even carelessly, it was making itself known again. The power woven into human speech, once reduced to motivational quotes or psychological theory, was stepping back into its original role as an active, living force. For a long time, words were treated as harmless, especially in everyday life. They're just words, people would say, brushing them off as temporary sounds that disappear the moment they're spoken. But over the past 2 days, that belief has started cracking. People are noticing that what they say doesn't just fade into the air anymore. It lingers. It shapes moods, decisions, confidence, fear, and direction. It builds inner worlds and tears them down. Words are revealing their true weight again, not as abstract ideas, but as real tools that mold reality from the inside out. At the core of this shift is a law so old that it predates culture itself. A law that has governed creation and consequence since the beginning, whether people acknowledged it or not. It's the same truth that has been passed down through wisdom literature, spiritual teaching, and lived experience, summed up in a simple yet profound idea. Life and death rest in the power of the tongue. For many years, that phrase sat quietly on pages, quoted but rarely felt. Now it feels like it has stepped off the page and into daily life. People are starting to sense immediate feedback from their speech. A harsh word spoken in frustration seems to echo back faster, showing up as tension, resistance, or regret. A word of encouragement spoken sincerely seems to open doors almost instantly, softening situations, shifting energy, restoring hope. It's as if reality itself is responding more quickly, more directly, to what is spoken aloud. The delay that once existed between words and outcomes feels shorter now, and that's catching people off guard. This law was never inactive. It was always working quietly, shaping habits, relationships, and self-image over time. But now it feels reactivated in a visible way. The results are harder to ignore. Patterns that once took years to notice are showing themselves in days or even hours. People are realizing that the way they speak about themselves, their future, their limitations, and their possibilities isn't just commentary. It's construction, it's design, it's declaration. As this realization spreads, many are feeling echoes of something even older, something rooted at the very beginning of creation. There's a familiar rhythm returning, a pattern that starts with sound and ends with substance. The ancient cadence of "let there be" feels alive again, not just as a historical phrase but as a present-day principle. Creation begins with speech. Light follows a voice. Order follows a word. And now, that same creative rhythm is stirring through human mouths once more. There's a growing sense that humanity is rediscovering what it means to speak as creators, not just commentators. Made in the image of a speaking creator, people are remembering that their words carry intention, direction, and power. Speech isn't just a way to describe reality, it's a way to shape it. Every sentence carries a blueprint. Every repeated phrase becomes a pattern. Every declaration, spoken long enough, starts to feel like truth, whether it builds or destroys. Over the last 2 days, words have stopped feeling ordinary. They've begun to feel like instruments, each one contributing to a larger symphony that restarted quietly but deliberately. Some instruments produce harmony, others dissonance, but none of them are neutral. Every voice adds something. Every mouth releases energy into the shared space of human experience. And as people become more aware of this, the atmosphere itself feels different, charged, sensitive, responsive. With this awakening comes tension, because the first place this power reveals itself isn't in the world outside. It's inside. The real battleground isn't society, politics, or culture. It's the inner dialogue that has been running on autopilot for years. Thoughts feel louder now. Inner voices are more vivid, more insistent. People are catching themselves mid-sentence, realizing how often they speak against themselves without even noticing. Jokes rooted in self-doubt, casual negativity, offhand complaints, all of it is surfacing faster, demanding attention. What once hid beneath humor or habit is now exposed. Words spoken without intention are showing their consequences more clearly. That offhand "I'm terrible at this" suddenly feels heavier. That repeated "nothing ever works out for me" starts sounding less like exaggeration and more like a script being rehearsed. At the same time, words of hope feel more charged than ever. A simple "I can grow" or "this can change" carries unexpected strength, as if something unseen is backing it up. An unseen war is becoming unmistakable, the clash between old patterns of self-doubt and a deeper truth waiting to be spoken. People feel it when they're alone, when they're driving, when they're lying in bed at night replaying conversations. There's a sense that neutrality is no longer an option. Silence feels different. Speech feels heavier. Choosing what to say and what not to say has become a daily act of awareness. This isn't about perfection or fear. It's about awakening. It's about realizing that the human heart has always been the command center and the tongue has always been the trigger. The battlefield is internal because that's where creation begins. Every external outcome traces back to an internal agreement, spoken aloud often enough to feel real. And now, with this ancient force re-emerging into awareness, people are being invited to listen more closely to their own voices. Some are resisting the shift, brushing it off as coincidence or mood. Others are leaning into it, feeling a strange sense of responsibility mixed with excitement. There's a recognition forming that words are not just expressions of who we are, they are tools shaping who we become. Every careless phrase carries weight. Every intentional word carries potential. And in this moment, that truth feels closer, clearer, and more active than it has in a very long time. The human heart has become the front line, and speech has become the signal flare. What's spoken there doesn't stay there. It moves outward, shaping perception, behavior, and ultimately reality itself. And as this awareness continues to spread, it becomes harder to ignore the feeling that something profound has reawakened. Something ancient, powerful, and deeply human, waiting to be understood, honored, and used with intention. Relieved face. Since this awakening began, something remarkable has been happening at the intersection of faith and speech. They are no longer operating as separate ideas, discussed in sermons or books and then left behind in daily life. They are syncing up again, moving on the same wavelength, as if a long-lost connection has been restored. People are noticing that when belief rises internally and words follow with clarity, something shifts almost immediately. Speech backed by faith doesn't feel forced or performative anymore. It feels aligned, steady, and strangely effective. What Jesus once described about speaking to mountains no longer sounds distant or symbolic to those paying attention. It feels tangible, grounded, and alive. Mountains today don't always look like rocks and hills. They show up as fear, debt, illness, addiction, broken relationships, or deeply rooted self-doubt. And yet when words are spoken with conviction instead of hesitation, those mountains seem to respond. Not always instantly, not always dramatically, but perceptibly. Resistance softens. Paths appear. Strength rises where exhaustion once lived. This isn't about magic or formulas. It's not about saying the right phrase enough times to force an outcome. What's happening is alignment. Humanity's inner vibration, long dulled by distraction and disbelief, is rising to meet a divine frequency that was always present. When belief and language lock in together, creation responds. Words stop feeling hollow and start carrying resonance, like sound waves finally hitting the right pitch to move what once felt immovable. In this space, belief is no longer passive. It's active, audible, expressed. Faith isn't something quietly held inside while life happens unchecked around it. It's something spoken, released, and trusted. And in this moment when speech and faith meet, creation begins again, not on a cosmic scale, but in kitchens, cars, hospital rooms, offices, and quiet moments of decision. As this frequency continues to spread, echoes from ancient stories are surfacing with new relevance. The energy of David standing before Goliath feels closer than ever, not as a distant tale of heroism, but as a living pattern repeating itself. The heart of that story was never about physical strength or military skill. It was about a voice refusing to agree with fear. A young shepherd spoke differently than everyone else around him, and that difference changed the outcome. That same pattern is emerging now. Small voices, once drowned out by doubt or dismissed as unrealistic, are beginning to rise. People who were told to stay quiet, to be practical, to lower their expectations, are daring to speak faith into situations that look overwhelming. And what's surprising many is how precisely those words are reshaping outcomes. Not through force, but through consistency and conviction. It feels as though David's declaration didn't end on that battlefield. It rippled forward through time, carried in the DNA of courage, waiting for another generation to pick it up. That courage isn't loud or arrogant. It's steady. It says, "This is not the end," even when evidence suggests otherwise. And when spoken aloud, those words seem to cut through impossibility with the same clarity that once brought down a giant. Ordinary people are discovering that they don't need extraordinary status for their words to matter. They need alignment. They need belief rooted deeper than circumstance. And as more people dare to speak from that place, the atmosphere shifts. Fear loses some of its authority. Intimidation weakens. Hope feels reasonable again. Alongside this courage, something gentler but equally powerful is unfolding. Words are becoming healing currents. Speech itself is carrying restorative energy into spaces that once felt permanently damaged. People are noticing calm settling into environments that were once ruled by chaos. Tension eases during conversations that used to escalate. Bodies respond differently to stress. Minds find rest where anxiety once looped endlessly. Scriptural phrases that were once recited out of habit are now vibrating with life when spoken with intention. They feel less like quotations and more like activations. Gratitude spoken aloud shifts emotional weight. Trust expressed in the middle of uncertainty changes perspective. Faith declared in moments of weakness seems to invite strength rather than deny reality. What's becoming clear is that every sentence carries potential. Words can soothe or scar, build or break, open or close. And in this season, that truth is no longer abstract. It's observable. People are watching circumstances respond in real time, not because the words are special on their own, but because of the alignment behind them. This awakening isn't asking for perfection in speech. It's inviting awareness. It's revealing that language is never neutral. Every phrase releases something into the world and into the speaker. As people grow more conscious of this, speech becomes slower, more deliberate, more honest. Not because of fear, but because of respect for the power being held. The wave continues, and with it comes a quiet responsibility. To speak life when destruction feels easier. To speak hope without denying pain. To speak healing even while wounds are still visible. And as more people step into this awareness, words are no longer just sounds passing through the air. They become currents, carrying intention, shaping outcomes, and participating in a creative process that feels ancient, sacred, and newly alive. Relieved face. Over the past 48 hours, another layer of this awakening has become impossible to ignore. Emotions feel closer to the surface, not necessarily stronger but clearer. Words come out sharper, faster, more revealing than before. Some people are surprised by what slips from their mouths, while others are startled by sudden moments of insight that arrive mid-sentence. It feels as though a fire has been lit beneath human speech, intensifying everything it touches. This is the same fire once described as small yet powerful, capable of setting entire forests ablaze or providing light in the deepest darkness. That fire has reignited, and it's doing two things at once. On one side, words spoken in anger or carelessness are igniting consequences almost immediately. A harsh comment fractures trust faster than expected. An impulsive outburst creates distance that feels heavier than before. The burn is quicker, not as punishment, but as exposure. The connection between cause and effect is no longer hidden. Speech reveals its power the moment it leaves the mouth. On the other side of that same fire, words of love, humility, and compassion are carrying warmth instead of destruction. Healing seems to accelerate when kindness is spoken sincerely. Apologies land deeper. Encouragement penetrates further. A simple expression of care calms situations that once spiraled out of control. The same flame that can destroy is now illuminating what truly matters. This dual eruption isn't chaos, it's purification. The fire isn't here to silence speech but to refine it. Careless language, once tolerated, now feels uncomfortable to speak or hear. Truth rises to the surface more easily, even when it's inconvenient. Speech has become a mirror, reflecting the inner condition of the soul with startling clarity. People are hearing themselves more honestly, sometimes for the first time, and that awareness alone is changing behavior. As this intensity builds, something unexpected follows it. A stillness begins to appear between words. A sacred silence, not forced, not awkward, but natural. Amid the heightened energy, many are finding themselves pausing before responding. The urge to fill every gap with sound is fading. Silence is no longer uncomfortable. It feels intelligent, guided, purposeful. An ancient wisdom is resurfacing, not as a quote remembered, but as an instinct rediscovered. There is a time to speak, and there is a time to remain silent, and the difference between the two feels clearer now. People are noticing moments when words would only dilute truth, and restraint feels wiser than expression. Responses slow down, listening deepens, reactions soften into reflection. There's a quiet strength in this stillness, reminiscent of moments when silence spoke louder than defense ever could. The calm that once surrounded unwavering resolve is now settling into ordinary hearts. Silence is no longer mistaken for weakness or absence. It's being recognized as timing, as discernment, as alignment with something greater than impulse. In these pauses, clarity forms. In these gaps, wisdom speaks without sound. This balance between fire and stillness is reshaping how people relate to their own voices. Speech is becoming intentional again, and silence is reclaiming its rightful place as part of communication, not its enemy. Together, they create rhythm, like breath in and breath out, expression and restraint working in harmony. As days unfold, it's becoming clear that this is not a passing surge of awareness. Something deeper is underway. A repatterning is happening, slow but steady, rewiring how the tongue and heart work together. Old habits of speech are loosening their grip without effort or strain. Phrases once spoken automatically are quietly disappearing. Complaints soften into observations. Harshness gives way to honesty. The shift doesn't feel forced. It feels organic, as if the soul is choosing differently on its own. People are noticing their language change without conscious planning. Tone adjusts naturally. Words feel lighter, more accurate. There's less need to exaggerate or defend. Reflection is deepening, and with it comes alignment. Practices like meditation, prayer, and mindful presence aren't being adopted out of discipline alone. They're happening instinctively, as if the inner environment is seeking coherence with this new frequency. Conversation itself is becoming a place of transformation. Each exchange carries awareness. Each pause carries meaning. The language once spoken only in sacred spaces is quietly returning to everyday life, not as formal phrases, but as attitudes, tones, and intentions. The language of heaven, once thought distant or symbolic, is being relearned in real time, through ordinary people choosing words that heal, pauses that honor, and silence that listens. This transformation is unfolding one conversation at a time, one sentence at a time, one choice at a time. And as it continues, speech is no longer just a habit. It is becoming a conscious act of alignment, a living expression of an inner world learning to speak in harmony with something eternal. Folded hands. Within these same 48 hours, beneath the sweeping language of awakening and frequency, something deeply personal has been unfolding in quiet, individual lives. It's happening in ways that don't make headlines and don't need an audience. One of those ripples looks a lot like John's story. Not because his name is special, but because his transformation is familiar. For years, John had spoken from a place of pressure and disappointment. His words carried the weight of frustration he never fully named. Conversations were edged with sharpness, even when he didn't intend harm. He didn't think of himself as cruel, just tired, worn down, stuck in patterns that felt impossible to escape. But within this narrow window of time, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. There was no single moment where everything changed. Instead, he noticed himself pausing. A sentence that would normally come out harsh stopped halfway. A reaction softened before it reached his lips. When he did speak, the tone surprised even him. It felt unfamiliar, like wearing clothes that fit better than the old ones but still needed breaking in. And almost immediately, the world around him responded. Conversations didn't escalate the way they used to. People leaned in instead of pulling away. Situations that once triggered anger now felt manageable. What happened to John isn't unique, and that's the point. His once solitary change is now echoing across countless lives. People who have lived for years trapped in cycles of anger, resentment, or quiet despair are speaking differently without fully knowing why. Their words are losing their edge. Their sentences are carrying less defense and more honesty. And as their speech changes, their lives begin to soften around them, like hard ground finally absorbing rain. This divine movement isn't sweeping past individuals, it's entering them. It moves personally, intimately, like dawn slipping through narrow windows and lighting up rooms one by one. No two awakenings look exactly the same, but they share a common thread. Something old is loosening its grip. Something gentler is taking its place. People are recognizing themselves in their own voices again, sometimes for the first time in years. As these personal ripples multiply, the larger shift continues to expand. What began as a whisper 2 days ago is now brushing against countless corners of daily life. It shows up in homes where arguments used to linger, now dissolving sooner than expected. It appears in workplaces where tension eases just enough for cooperation to return. It settles into hearts that had grown accustomed to unrest, bringing a calm that feels unfamiliar but welcome. Clarity is returning in subtle ways. Decisions feel less chaotic. Reactions feel less urgent. There's a sense of things falling into place, not because circumstances have dramatically improved, but because the inner noise has quieted. The world doesn't look radically different, yet it feels subtly rewritten, as if the script beneath the surface has changed. This rewriting isn't happening through force or control. It's happening through gentle spoken faith, through words chosen with care, through silence honored as much as speech. What started as an unseen ripple is now a quiet current, steady and consistent, carrying renewal without demanding attention. It doesn't rush. It doesn't overwhelm. It simply continues, touching one interaction at a time, reshaping the texture of everyday life. There's no sense of urgency to prove it or explain it. The evidence shows itself in softened expressions, calmer responses, and an underlying peace that seems to hold even when circumstances remain imperfect. As this transformation unfolds, it becomes clear that this isn't a temporary surge of awareness destined to fade. It feels more like a restoration, a remembering of something humanity once knew intuitively and then forgot. Words are stepping back into their original role, not as noise or filler, but as instruments of creation. People are realizing that speech doesn't merely describe the world they live in, it participates in forming it. Conversations are beginning to feel sacred again, not because they are formal or spiritual on the surface, but because intention has returned to them. Each sentence feels like it carries weight. Each exchange feels like it matters. Words are no longer tossed out carelessly and forgotten. They linger, they build, they connect. Every spoken phrase becomes a thread woven into something larger and more enduring than the moment itself. The ancient law that once sounded poetic or symbolic is now visible and felt. Life and death through the tongue is no longer an abstract idea. It's showing up in the way environments change, relationships heal, and inner worlds stabilize. The connection between speech and outcome feels undeniable, not in a fearful way, but in a clarifying one. Awareness replaces ignorance. Responsibility replaces habit. And still, this unfolding doesn't feel complete. It feels ongoing, open-ended, alive. The divine movement continues beyond this moment, beyond this awareness, inviting each soul to remain attentive. Not to strive or control, but to observe, to listen, to notice what happens when words are spoken with alignment, when silence is honored, and when faith is allowed to breathe through language. Something has been restored and something is still becoming. The current moves forward quietly, patiently, waiting to see what will be spoken next. 48 hours ago, the shift reached its peak. A quiet moment, an ordinary sentence, and suddenly lives began bending in new directions. No spectacle, just words landing with undeniable power. What started as a whisper has become a living story, and you're part of it now. If this journey moved something inside you, let it continue. Hit the like button, share this with someone who needs it, and type a comment to mark that you were here when it unfolded.